Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and we've got a full-length album review here, this time from the newest project from Sam Hunt, Southside. This was not supposed to happen. Now, I understand if that statement is vague, because when it comes to Sam Hunt and this album, and even this review, it could refer to a number of things, but I'm trying to look at the biggest and most positive possible picture here. Maybe even from the perspective of someone who would call themselves a fan of Sam Hunt. Because I know people in that group. People who liked or even loved his 2014 debut album, Montevallo, which did attract some critical praise, and where even at that time, he was not the worst of the bunch coming out of bro country. He seemed to have charisma, he was a proven songwriter in his ability to construct a catchy hook, and with songs like Cop Car, he had proven he could write a pretty good, if not great song. And I want to lay this out plainly, that he has legitimate talent. If he wanted a long-term career in Nashville, in mainstream country, probably could have had it. That was 2014. We are now in 2020, and if I want to consider the prime example of waste in mainstream country, Sam Hunt's the poster child. Oh, I was prepared for the worst. In early 2017, with the release of Drinkin Too Much and Body Like a Back Road, two songs you can argue among the worst of the decade in any genre, I was prepared for Sam Hunt's upcoming album to crush the competition and bring back the zombified corpse of trap-infused bro country to ruin Nashville for another couple of years. But that didn't happen. Yeah, Body Like a Back Road was dominant in 2017, but it didn't really spark a trend or a revival of the sound, or spawn other acts to leech off its rampant idiocy. Instead, Nashville took the snap beats and the flimsy production and then gave it to Dustin Lynch and Kane Brown and Russell Dickerson, and the advent of the softer tones in boyfriend country, which might be milquetoast and treading into boy band territory, but it wasn't as glaringly incompetent or embarrassing as the worst of bro country. More to the point, more of the bros, they either went back to their normal sound or they actually got better. I mean, after a fashion, of course, but Cole Swindell and especially Thomas Rhett were able to move on and improve. Hell, I could even argue that Florida Georgia Line made a couple decent songs in their braying search for identity after the trend. But Sam Hunt? He wasn't really even part of the conversation. He kept pushing singles, but they didn't perform, not even close to the heights he had achieved in the mid-2010s, and nothing he was saying or doing outside of this was inspiring a lot of confidence. He claimed that his next album would have elements that sounded like Tyler Childers, right after releasing Downtown's Dead. Then there was the DUI incident in November of 2019, which I wouldn't even bring up if it wasn't being nearly the only Sam Hunt news in between failed singles and a really bad look in an industry town like Nashville, even though nobody got hurt. And the rumor mill was not helping matters. He had his festival canceled. In summer 2017, Sam Hunt did an interview with The Boot that made it sound like he had no interest in releasing additional music. It just demanded too much work as part of his life. So if you're at MCA Nashville 2.5 years later, you're probably tearing your hair out trying to find a way to get something, a functional album. And a lot of fans, they don't tend to think of this as an industry. To move singles to the radio, promote an album, and tour, that costs a lot of money. And if Sam Hunt's attitude is, whatever brah, I'll do this at my own time, and the singles, they aren't working, you're looking for ways to cut your losses and get them off the books. And that's right before the pandemic hits, which will likely force a delay of his tour and seriously cut back on all the parties that primarily served as his demo. And this is where I have to piss some of you off and say this. You know who else is on MCA Nashville right now, beyond Jordan Davis and a few 90s legacy acts that I really like but aren't high priorities? And you know who could have used some of that radio push over the past decade? Casey Musgraves. I mean, imagine if she got a quarter or a tenth of the radio push Sam Hunt got from the label. And yeah, I'm absolutely bitter about that, and I'll explain why later on in the review, but let me make this clear, that's not really much of a factor in any knives coming out for this album, Southside. I mean, for God's sake, he packaged both Drinkin Too Much and Body Like a Back Road on this thing, along with every other failed single he's had in the past 3 years. Again, this screams of a label cutting their losses however they can to ship something that's vaguely sellable. So, a base level of awful, it's kind of built into the conversation already. So how low can we go? Well, folks, I'll be honest, my first emotion after finishing this project was not rage or disappointment like with AJR or the Zac Brown Band's last project, but sheer dumbfounded shock. Again, I bring up the waste, how much money and manpower behind the scenes was spent in order to make this album, and how much more will be spent to move it after release. The fact this was released at all in this form kind of blows my mind, especially with the failures that are already to this album's name. Hell, I'd argue the only reason that this exists is sunk cost fallacy and the desperate hope that juicing up the numbers on iTunes or on Spotify will give him just enough traction to gaslight unsuspecting consumers that there might be something to it. And that left me with the sinking feeling of dread that not only was that likely to work, but opens up the question of whether or not I should even cover it. I mean, I could have maintained my dignity and vetoed this from my schedule weeks ago, or left it on the pulse for a quick drive-by thrashing, but just like with Montevallo, something gives me the uncanny feeling this is gonna get a pass from a lot of people who should know better. And if I can be the voice screaming to the contrary as the devil's advocate, well, get me a goddamn pitchfork, cause I'm about to start breathing fire. Let me not mince words here. Southside by Sam Hunt is not only considerably worse than Montevallo in downplaying his strengths and amplifying everything that makes him such a nauseating presence in mainstream country, this will likely be one of the worst albums released in 2020. Not since Thomas Rhett's Tangled Up has there been a worse bro country adjacent project, and this does not even have an Ed Sheeran ripoff in order to save it. But to be blunt, again, I'm still kind of shocked this was shipped at all. An album as rife with obvious failures as this is, they threw money and professional songwriters behind this, and there are trap artists who churn out mixtapes and albums with development time and weeks that sound better than this. And I can argue after a year with Lil Nas X and his push of country trap, this doesn't even sound current. Yes, even by the standards of a nebulous and questionable subgenre that's only barely started, Sam Hunt isn't even doing it well. There are retreads making a similar sound in Nashville and third stringers like Dustin Lynch and Russell Dickerson who at least sound vaguely aware of the trends and sounds. Nothing gives me the impression more that this was assembled in post than how badly the trap beats are mixed and blended and are about 2 to 3 years removed from where the genre is right now. In the mainstream. And isn't a huge factor of Sam Hunt's nebulous appeal is that he's pushing the genre forward? You can argue that he's at least trying to embrace more pedal steel and organic country textures, but when you got no sense of groove and all your percussion comes from a cheap drum machine, the clash creates a jarring sense of dissonance, not helped by Sam Hunt's refusal to add any sense of greater warmth or texture to any of his organic pickups. That lingering sense of sourness, it was a big issue why Montevallo continued to curdle in my stomach all throughout since its release, but Southside is considerably worse. And before we get to individual songs, we kinda have to highlight how Sam Hunt's delivery is somehow making all of it worse. His halting spoken word passing as rap, it's always been bad and really embarrassing if you know hip-hop. But not only is it back, you get the distinctive impression he's not even having any fun with it. I'd argue it almost falls into the uncanny valley for me, even with bro country. He's not warm or loose like Jake Owen, or trying to be sensitive like Thomas Rhett or the better cuts from Cole Swindell, or even trying for antisocial machismo that could have some smolder and muscle like Jason Aldean or Tyler Farr. And he sure as hell doesn't have a flow or a sense of groove comparable to Kane Brown right now. Instead, you can tell Sam Hunt is trying some of all of this, and it leads to a turgid, generally unlikable presence that can't even pull together a house party, or a leave the light on, or even a take your time. Yeah, they were dumb songs, and in the last case, way more pushy than it should be. We'll come back to that. But you know what? To the target audience, I hear the appeal. I hear where that could have worked. Whereas here, honestly, I could just point at the mugging jackassery that is Body Like a Back Road and repeat any number of the half-dozen rants I've already made about that song over the years and highlight its conceptual failure. It's emblematic of the album, but the ugly truth is that it's probably mid-tier on this horribly sequenced and even worse produced album. Sam Hunt has gotten some leeway in the past because he's trying to integrate more pedal steel and banjo into the mix, or the vague assumption that makes it more traditional, but not if the pickups are produced and blended like boiled ass. Again, there's no attempt to find a timbre in these tones that could match the weight and body of the beats that Sam Hunt uses, or blending that could make say, I don't know, the sample of the 50s country song There Stands the Glass by Webb Pierce work in the mix of the song, hard to forget. There's no real attempt to match the tempo or texture or take any real cues from how hip-hop and even country have handled samples for decades. Instead, it just ripped to shreds and grafted onto an underweight trap beat that's somehow even worse than when Keith Urban grabbed a guitar lick from Merle Haggard on Coming Home back on Ripcord. This isn't drawing on tradition, this is chopping up bodies for a grist mill. And the ugly dissonance doesn't match any of the attempted mood at all, and that song's incoherent as it is. And yet if we're looking for most of this album's biggest problems, it comes in some of that dissonance. Not only is the sound misshapen and badly mixed, the mood it creates is sour and turgid, and it rarely matches the content. And when it does, you kind of wish it really didn't. And it doesn't just stop there. I've already talked about Kinfolks and Downtown's Dead on Billboard Breakdown, but here they just feel like these galumphing clunkers that sound so strained and forced. And then there's all the vocal blending on Young Once, especially when it's trying to be more atmospheric and it just sounds really muddy, or how badly the banjo blends in with the trap groove on Let It Down. Yeah, okay, there are moments where the pickups sound passable. 2016 is a sleepy ballad to start off the album, and the vocals are too close, but the pedal steel and acoustics sound okay, and I like the fiddle on Nothing Lasts Forever. But does that make up for how ugly the guitars sound on Body Like a Back Road? Or how across all these trap beats we don't get a punchy groove, or solid flow, or anything that sounds current, or textured, or interesting? Again, Sam Hunt has had years and countless examples of how to get this right, and how underweight and poorly chosen the hip-hop elements are. It smacks of non-effort. And again, all the production credits are in-house here. You could have found a dozen beat makers on YouTube and SoundCloud that are making harder and more interesting production than this. But you know what, let's flip the script for a second and say, maybe it's supposed to sound hideous in order to amplify the ugly stories and emotionality that's in a lot of the content. I mean, it means that hookup moments like Kinfolks and Body Like a Back Road and the Let's Get Stupid and Fuck Each Other Even As I Cover Your Mouth So My Parents Don't Hear song with Young Ones, throw those out of the equation. Okay, but maybe if you go down that road, you can argue that this album has some consistency in being a completely miserable experience. Sam Hunt will spend most of this project miserable and cranky. And you know what? Maybe like Drake, the point is just to wallow in the bad taste, bad guy TMI of it all. Here's the problem. In the cases where Drake does this well, and these days it's few and far between, there is a level of wit and self-awareness that can come through with it. An ability to sell a mood and paint a picture that might not be balanced or flattering, but it's often more revealing of both him and the girls in question. There's nuance, there's a little bit of complexity. Sam Hunt does not have anything close to that level of introspection, and that means this project can get very pushy and projecting very fast. I said earlier that Body Like a Back Road is mid-tier for this album, and that's the reason why. It's at least tonally coherent and somewhat honest in what it is. A completely fucking stupid bro country hookup song. I mean, here, even on the songs that approach being passable, which I'd argue are 2016 and Breaking Up Was Easy in the 90s, the attitude leaking underneath is just noxious, and there doesn't seem to be much self-awareness or introspection, and there's not even a real attempt to try to make any of the toxic elements appealing. 2016, for instance, it wants to go back a year where he can win this girl back. Why go back to 2016 of all years? Different point, but fine. But not only does the song have the Crash My Party problem of sounding mournful for all the fun and freedom that he's giving up, but he also wants to go back and make the lies he previously told come true. But they're still lies, dude! So is this the healthy relationship you honestly want to fix? Or take the slightly more detailed misery of Breaking Up Was Easy in the 90s, where he's now creeping her on Instagram post-breakup, and he wants to convince himself that she's a lot more interested than she clearly is in him, with a healthy dose of all the Drake-esque concern trolling. But it's not a song that wants to show any accountability, or even make the easy layup of referencing breakup songs in the 90s. Old Dominion would have gotten that right. He's just a product of the modern generation, but she clearly isn't getting the same level of leeway or framing. And this is where Southside becomes repugnant. And again, it's not just because there are plenty of songs where Sam Hunt comes across like a total asshole. but because he can't even make being an asshole interesting or compelling. Because from a lot of the album, you can tell he doesn't think he is an asshole. And the song that's already gotten the most scorn is That Ain't Beautiful, where clearly some girl is trying to live the party, the Instagram lifestyle, with Sam Hunt scolding her on the hook saying, "That ain't beautiful, and you can do better." The song's got this creepy, puritanical vibe that by the second verse seems to be actually judging this girl for attending a wild destination wedding and being a little reckless. But you put Drinkin' Too Much, a song about your now current wife airing out all her dirty laundry even though she asked you not to, and yet you get a pass? Or take Hard to Forget, where he's just convinced that this girl has just been egging him on, trying to get back with her, playing Hard to Forget, as it will, by she's dressing sexy at the same party, and not picking her stuff up yet from their former apartment. Even if the entire song has a weird pseudo-stalking vibe that gives me every reason in the world while she's not coming near you yet. And then there's the extended whining of Let It Down, where he's pleading for one more night to ease his breaking heart, for her to hold her horses, especially looking like that. And I'm left asking, why the hell would she give this guy even that time of day? Or take Nothing Lasts Forever, which actually had a decent lyrical flip, having him wish that he meant something to her because nothing would last forever. Until you read even a little deeper into the song and realize a giant load of negging and how many things that he wishes she does and she still felt. The entire bridge wishes that she thought she was guilty or childish or stupid or lonely, and wow, this guy's a dick. And once that sentiment becomes entrenched on multiple songs, it makes even moments trying for coherent melancholy like Downtown's Dead sound a lot worse, and that song had problems as it is. And the hookups get skeevy as all hell. I've already mentioned Young once and how it couldn't manage its atmosphere to save its life, but the real low point is Sinning With You, which ramps up the projection of this girl being so pure that it never felt like sinning when they were hooking up. And I'm just gonna quote lines from the song. "Your body was baptized, so disenfranchised, I was your favorite confession. His grace and your grace felt like the same to me. Pull me under your innocence. I know what it feels like crossing the line, but I never felt shame, never felt sorry, never felt guilty touching your body." And finally, as you would expect, if it's so wrong, why does it feel so right? Maybe it's just me, but conflating your religious ecstasy with your orgasm, while we're very much aware of Sam Hunt's characterization across this entire album, it raises the specter of playing on religious tropes for exploitation of innocence, and when you match it with the entitlement of this album, that's creepy. It's fucking gross. Well, you know what, let's circle back to the word entitlement, and why this album does make me angry. Not just at it, but the system behind it, which I'd argue is actually fair game here, because that album would not exist at all without that system. Because Nashville radio programmers, label executives, they had pushed a meritocracy narrative for decades, that if you're good enough and you work hard enough, you can make it. Most recently, this came up when there was pushback against systemic change to get more women on the radio, with their argument being, well, if their music was better, it'd get there. And it's total fucking bullshit. This is a narrative that's built to enable exploitation of artists who are not as connected, not as knowledgeable, or who have seen through the system and won't get in line. Which is why Casey Musgraves getting the equivalent of blackballed by Nashville radio for years now is so goddamn galling. Right now, she's proven she'll find a way, as have many others in indie country. But if you want the blazing example of mainstream country hypocrisy of that narrative, Southside, Sam Hunt. No other album or artist in the modern era of mainstream country has been allowed to fail as many times as he has, both commercially and critically, and still have the support of his label and his consistent promotion for an album that he doesn't even sound like he wanted to make, and basically came out as an undercooked, barely finished disaster across the board. This isn't just mediocre or forgettable. There's plenty of those coming out of Nashville. This is an album that's actively enabled to suck, but will sell just enough with the full force of promotion and catering to the worst of cultural biases that'll push back on people like me who are gonna call it out. In that way, even though Sam Hunt has expressed no political affiliation publicly, it is emblematic of this time and what guys like him have actively been unable to get away with, and regardless of where you fall, that's hypocritical. It's disgusting. But some of you are gonna say, well, you know what, that's just the industry. That's not fair to hold the art that only exists because of that industry to that standard. I mean, you gotta separate the art from the conditions from which it was made, even though that drips through and shades every element of it. And you know what? While that conclusion is the height of intellectual dishonesty, I'll play the game. I can consider Southside outside of that. When it's not boring, it's infuriating. When it wants to push the sound, but it doesn't grasp how any of the component parts work within the genres. The content is so emotionally incoherent in the framing, I thought the dissonance had to be part of the point until you realize there was nothing close to that level of sophistication or effort here. And it features some of the worst sequencing on any album I have ever reviewed. I have reviewed thousands, over 1,000 albums. I mean, I'm not sure it's the shrieking once-in-a-decade concentrated migraine that was the click by AJR, but at least AJR seemed to care. I hated the music, but they cared about what they were making. This is lazy, it's crass, it's manipulative as fuck, and it doesn't even serve the target audiences all that well. I mean, let's ask that question. What girl wants to be described and gaslit like this? And what guy wants to self-identify with the selling, self-obsessed dumbassery that this is? As much as y'all want me to get angry and roast this, I hope you enjoyed it. I just feel gross. I feel gross talking about it. And what's so deeply uncomfortable about this is the knowledge that me saying this might not change anyone's mind or change the system. One critic like me in this position does not have that power, even though I'd like to hope that it would get people away from this. But I can do this. Strong 1 out of 10, avoid this like the goddamn plague. And if you stuck around this long, you're looking for country that drops in 2020 that's trying harder than this, could use all the attention, all the promotion that this is gonna get and shouldn't. Little Big Town, Terry Allen, Brandy Clark, Caitlin Smith, Gabe Lee, Ashley McBride. They could all use that. Leave Sam Hunt and Southside in the ditch, where it thoroughly belongs. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, I know I got angry, but this album is fucking terrible, and I think it's deserving of all the vitriol that it's getting. But yeah, if you want to like and subscribe, have fun. If you got all the comments, I know I never get this angry, those comments come through, so there you go, have fun. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you want to hear about some of those much better albums, or add albums to my schedule, link to my Patreon, right over there. Happy to have you guys come on board, even though we are in some tough times. I get it if you don't. Just thanks a lot for your support. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.